what I've changed my mind on, or what we've changed our mind on as coaches, as health professionals, as humans, in training, in nutrition, in psychology. One of the first ones, you have a preference of where you want to start?
No, you started.
One of the first ones that I think is great to start is program length. When I started off actually working here at Woodford's and I was coaching here, we always did 4-week programs. We'd have them on pen and paper actually. We always do 4-week programs. And for our athletes, like, we always need to change the variables up because our athletes adapt quickly and we want to always keep it fresh for them. And then I later realized we're just getting started by just doing a 4-week program. They're really just getting started. And then we did 6 weeks. And then I did 8 weeks. And then we changed our program template to 12 weeks because we realized that 4 weeks is way, way too short.
Yeah.
And even now, 12 weeks, I have changed my mind on because the first few weeks of a program, you're just kind of getting into it, right? And even that can be extended up until 4 weeks. You're getting the motor control, you're understanding the technique, the pattern, you're adjusting, you're adapting, you're refining. Now that can extend all the way 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then you hit a really good rhythm. And if you're in a really good rhythm and you're still progressing, why would we stop?
Yeah.
Why would we stop what's working?
I'm going to tell you why. Because I think
for
it's
fun, enjoyment.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
No, this is it. It's what the customer wants, what
Behavior.
the customer needs.
Yeah, well.
Everywhere, man. And our clients are no exception. And I think that really, that filters into the way that you go about setting up your business model and the way that you may approach like your, the specifics, programming being one of it. So, I think, a lot of the clientele that you work with when it's straight off the bat, especially if it's in that general population, are going to be looking for novelty. And it changes, it's a new stimulus and they're still coming to like the understandings of like consistency and perfection and mastery of skill and all those kind of things. And what tends to be an easier, thing to latch onto is that novelty. It's like, oh wow, a new program, amazing,
Yeah.
I'm more motivated. And what you're alluding to, which I am in complete agreement with you, is if you're doing a 4-week program and you're training for 48 weeks of the year, and in week 1 of that program, every single program, you're feeling out the program and it's not the greatest week of like training for adaptations, then you just said goodbye to 25% of the year to get your gains. You know what I mean? So I think that's really important to realize is that like, that's one of the potential downsides, especially with a general population person who's still got a lot to master with those skills. And just to recognize that like, hey, novelty isn't everything, that's for sure. We can recognize it, but it, lends itself to this conversation.
And that's what I love about you, because you always have this beautiful devil's advocate, always seeing from different sides as we come together. And novelty is a great tool. And if a client comes to you, or you come to yourself and you're like, you know what? I just want to change. I'm sick of running, or I'm sick of doing a deadlift or a squat. Then we change it. But I would encourage people to think about, why do you want what do you want to get out of your training and your health? Because if you're just training for just general health and general enjoyment, that's absolutely fine. We'll change it when you need to. But for a lot of people, well, some people, they're pretty serious and you want progress. And for those types of people who are really dedicated, I would consider you delay your hedonistic, instant gratification, dopaminergic mind and replace that, or trying to replace that with, do you want novelty or progress? Now, they're not mutually exclusive, but if you can begin to associate a win with constant progress, like, fuck yeah, another rep, another 5 kilos, you can just keep running that. You can keep running that for, I've seen some coaches talk about this. I think it's Hypertrophy Coach on Instagram. 16 weeks, 24 weeks, like 6 months. Yeah. I haven't even considered doing a 6-month program, but now my mind is open to run this program for as long as we can agree on.
Yeah, so I always plant that seed pretty early on in the coaching experience with a new client, especially if they're in that beginner phase. I'll say, listen, when you first come to me, what you're probably gonna want to expect is, programming changes more frequently. But I go, as you take on an intermediate to an advanced trainer role here, then basically what's going to happen is you're going to realize that change is not necessarily what you're after. Okay. And so like the clients that I have that you are more experienced have far less program changes. In fact, like what usually happens is a conversation around about, like, let's say it's a 16-week mark, and I'll be like, hey, what's not working?
Yeah.
And then out of however many exercises, let's say like 30 exercises that might be getting done over the week or 24 exercises or something, we might be only having conversations about 4 of those exercises. Do you know what I mean? That's like, sweet, we're going to adjust the program slightly. Sometimes those conversations are around, like we might be having discussions around injury or niggles, or, it's like an elbow or a knee thing, or perhaps it's like we genuinely think that like, or actually a lot of the time it's about prioritization. It's like, okay, Mr. Small Arms, we need to like allocate a little bit more priority towards these arms. That's a genuinely good reason to adjust the program.
Yeah.
If you want to prioritize something. But for the most part, like what you're trying to do is like, especially for a newbie client, is like take that, like explain to them that where they're coming from, but what they can expect to change as a mindset on their programming is that they will be more fine with doing longer length programs as they become more experienced, because they will realize that novelty is not everything.
Yes, they will. And that's okay. They will realize that progress is the key.
Yeah.
Imagine if you said to me, hey, you got a new job, it's making you good money, but now I just want to change jobs again. And you just keep changing jobs every like 3 months or 6 months. But people are doing that with their programs. It's like, oh, it's going to make you money, but you kind of have to start from scratch again. You have to start making from $0 again. If you are making money in your business or your job or your profession, keep doing it and keep making more money until you no longer are making money, and then you change. An analogy that could be analogous to programming too.
Yeah. And look, one of the other things, and this is, I literally had this conversation with a new client this morning, was that, he's just coming up to like the end of like 12 weeks, and we were discussing, he's a drummer, right? And I didn't take into account like the amount of tibialis work that I should be throwing in for this guy. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm just like, of course, this makes total sense. And then I found his Instagram, and I'd shout it out if I saw it here, because now I'm obsessed with watching these drummers on Instagram. You got to check these guys out, man. They're just crazy, the followings that they got and their skills. But anyway, I was explaining this facet of the program to him this morning, and I sort of said, listen, the reason why I'm going to want to change this program actually is that I want to explore some different exercises with you for another different block, because then that gives me the chance to have feedback at that end of that 12 weeks and go, hey, what exercises worked best for you? Because that's really important to recognize. Like there's like different row variations that he might say, I get heaps out of this. I feel like, this is the exercise. Exactly. And so then that lends itself to us doing the best exercise selection to maintain.
That's very smart. So you're seeing it like as an experiment.
Yeah.
It's like we need variability to get feedback.
Yeah. If you put a client on a 24-week program with like, 20 exercises in it over 6 months, and you don't explore other exercises, then you don't get a chance to see another 6 months after that. 1 year later, I go, oh shit, we really shouldn't have done that exercise. You really weren't executing that well, and or it wasn't as beneficial as some other exercise that we could have gotten greater adaptations from.
But you said something good. You said like, if we have a conversation as a client, like, what do we need to change? What do we need to refine? It usually is like 5 things, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So if you're constantly having those conversations, you're good.
Yeah.
You can just keep refining it as you go along. You don't have to wait 6 months. Next, one more came to mind for me, unless you want to add anything else to that.
I would talk about the plateaus, like within a programming. Like, so,
that's when you need
and this is something I've changed my mind on. Like I used to be a little bit more, as coaches, we try not to knee-jerk react to things, right? You try to like let things have their course and realize sometimes the best action is inaction. Even if the client is like craving some kind of adjustment that, I'm paying you, change something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Are you paying for change or results?
That's right. And sometimes like when everything's going along and we're ticking goals, it can be like, it's the shortest check-in in the world. You know what I mean? Like it's great. And we can like, either you can dive into other stuff, or it's literally, that's the check-in. But sometimes the greatest thing that a coach can do is stay the course. And so I used to be a little bit quicker with changing things at like a certain, like at plateaus within things. And that time frame now has gotten longer. I'm like, no, stick at it. Stick at it.
Yeah.
We were having this discussion about you with your deadlift, even though you are still progressing on it, right? And when we were doing the sessions together down at Strength Culture, and I was watching it, I was like, you could stay at this weight now and just perfect that form a little bit.
Yeah.
That 220, 230, 235 range or whatever it was. I was like, it's there, but you can get better there. You know what I mean? And so just like giving people the opportunity to realize, yes, we're teaching them about progressive overload. Yes, that we're teaching them about tonnage. All that is really important. And it is like something, it is actually a tool in the conversation of like, staying the course with program duration, is like teaching them about progress. That would be an element of the conversation, right? But, if they have 2 or 3 weeks where they're not progressing on that, what they could be progressing on is the mastery of that skill.
The skill.
At that tonnage, at that weight. You know what I mean?
If people want to know more, look up Pavel Tsatsouline, step loading. it's going to be a hard name to spell out, but the Russians would often, and Broderick Chavez, when we were talking to him, I said this to you, Broderick Chavez, like a world-renowned American coach, expert in PEDs, he said to me, he's looking at my deadlifts and he asked me how it felt, and he's like, hey, how do you progressively overload? And he said, what if you perfected the technique by staying at it? What if progressive overload could, instead of just being reps and load in the gym, what if it was technique and mastering exactly what you said, that load? Let's say you're lifting 100 kilos, right? You want to go up more. But what if you just made that fucking technique just A+ instead of a B+?
Yeah.
And that's progressive overload too. And that's something that he illuminated to me that I didn't really acknowledge.
Yeah, I think it's a case of just like you're threading the needle. Like this whole conversation is like we're trying to encourage people's understanding of progressive overload and an awareness of their numbers and a tracking of those numbers so that you can ensure that you're doing it correctly, whilst also just sort of saying, look, the caveat is that you might get to these weights and it's okay to plateau at these weights. Every single one of us plateaus at certain weights across certain exercises and keeps applying ourselves until we bust through. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean you plateau for 1 week and then that expectation is the next week.
No. Stick with it at least a few weeks.
And then what's the worst thing you could do? Walk away from that exercise. I'll just park it. I couldn't go up 1 week. Let's just change programs.
It's like,
what's the usefulness in that?
Well, you've just kind of pulled the parachute, and sleep, stress, menstrual cycle, nutrition, so many variables that can influence that. So be patient. Focus on progress and consistency.
Yep.
When we started together, and early in my career, I would use tempo a lot. Tempo. Now, for those who don't know, tempo is a prescription of how long you're going to take the movement, often described as like 3, 2, 1, like 3 seconds down, 2 second hold, 1 second up. I used to always have a column in my program that would have tempo. I would be
it's still there. We hide it.
We hide it. That's the old us. I used to always prescribe tempo for every exercise. I thought it was really important. I was misguided on this. I have historically overestimated the utility of tempo dramatically. And for most, it matters. But for most people, it is pales in comparison to much more important variables like training load, intensity, and volume and consistency. And that you can just move in a slow, controlled fashion and you will get 90 to 95% of the results that you would have got otherwise.
So let's preface why we did that. Why did we do that? So that we could make sure that we were having a focus on the eccentric phase. So the stretching phase of a given movement. You know what I mean? So typically what we would be doing the tempo prescription for would be to prescribe a length for the prioritizing the eccentric phase. You know, you might change like you might be doing a pause, which by the way, I'll still plan pauses in different exercises. Or you might be doing like a pause in the contracted phase just so that you could get someone to like become more strict with that movement towards the shortened position. But essentially, I think like one of the main reasons we did it was so that we could get people focusing on that eccentric phase, which would elicit a greater hypertrophic response because we would weight that quite highly. And I think over time now, like as an industry of coaches, what we've come to recognize is that like it probably doesn't need that much attention to detail. What you really need to be explaining to clients is they need to do the exercise safely and effectively and efficiently, you know? And what that generally means is like, you're not swinging shit around, right? You got to use a strict form, but should it be so strict that it ends up with you shifting less tonnage? No. What we're trying to find is like a speed at which you can do it so you can maximize the amount of load and reps that you can do with good form. That's it.
And usually, well said, usually I find that tempo across the board for most things being about 2 to 3 seconds eccentric, about a half second to 1 second pause in that isometric position, and then intent.
Yep.
Intent to move the bar, intent to move the weight, to stimulate fast contractions through your nervous system. And that's it.
Yeah.
For most things, and then sometimes we'll put in our program, all right, we want a 3 second, 6 second eccentric here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think like just to add a caveat into this, I think this is a simple discussion. I think we covered that well. The caveat that I would sort of say is this: if I spot like in a video review of a client, if I spot some kind of like issue that has to do with speed or control, usually there is a conversation that happens about tempo. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I think you need to just like slow that Like spend a second in that contraction right there. Or what I want to see is like, you pause down the bottom before you engage and shift that again. You know what I mean? And that's it. There's no 4010, 5127, like those numbers, unless I really had to unhide that column, which I haven't had to in a long time, and put it there. There's no prescription on the tempo. It's this conversation.
Absolutely. Next, warm-ups and activation. Now, our friends and boys at Strength Culture, they've engaged in this conversation, got some heat for it.
Oh, tell me, I don't know this.
All right.
I feel like they've got heat for a lot of things.
Yeah, but it's in a good way. It's like they're stimulating like useful open dialogue and conversation, and they're being authentic. It's great.
Good.
Back in the day as an athlete, and I don't know about you, Ben, I think you gave me an example.
I was never an athlete. I wasn't like you, man.
A bodybuilding athlete, if you can call that, or if Project Chavez says, he says like a beauty pageant. Like,
yeah. I'll rock that.
Yeah. A little tutu, whatever. All right. So warm-ups. There seems to be a couple of camps. It's either I do almost no warm-up and I just get straight into the training. And then there's the other camp that is some 20, 30-minute, very convoluted long warm-up. When I went to America, one of the times I went to Brooklyn, NYC, and I was shadowing an Olympic weightlifting high-level national athlete. And I noticed her warm-ups were the most extensive I ever saw. It looked about 45 to 60 minutes, what I was asking her. Very extensive mobility, controlled articulate rotation movements, blah, 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 soft tissue work, all this stuff to get her prepared. I used to be more biased towards that. It would be soft tissue release, decompression through the spine, mobility and movement, like a little yoga sequence. I'd get my body temperature up, a little skipping, then I'd potentiate with my nervous system, be all these 5-step thing, right? I had to have a template, and I'd give a template to my clients. Yeah, that didn't need to happen. I didn't do all that.
Do you know what? There's a joke in this because like when you and I were deadlifting together a while back, actually, like at one of the other gyms, I remember.
Gym.
Yeah, I remember you would like walk in and then I'd lose you for 30 minutes. And I'm like, good, this gets me a chance to get up to 300 kilos before we deadlift. And I'm like, you're like, are you going to warm up? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to put 20s on the bar. And that was it. You know what I mean?
It was so divergent because you were the 40-year-old old head and I'm this young guy coming in. If anybody can afford to just do what you just did, it's me. Yeah, it was the opposite.
Man, I get it. That was the joke. I was like, yeah, you come back when I'm ready for my first work set.
And then I'd take time to all the way get back up.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, sorry, I cut you off. We're going to keep going with
That's a great example. What I realized was that once I started to look at the research and started to understand myself and just test it with my clients, certainly mobility drills and soft tissue work can be very valuable. But instead of doing it as a must, this has to happen every time before a session, now it's more reactive. Now it's like, how am I feeling? What movements am I doing? If I need deep ankle hip flexion, I'm going to hit those movements if I need it, instead of I'm going to do this 20-minute convoluted warm-up every single time because I've just committed to it. Now, the priority is body temperature and muscle temperature, because I saw that actually a 5 to 10-minute warm-up, getting your heart rate up, getting a light sweat, actually elicits 80-90% of the benefit that you would get from a long warm-up, because body temperature and muscle temperature, when you do that, you increase the contractile speed of nerve impulses from your brain down your spinal cord. You increase the pliability of muscles and joints, all by raising your body temperature. What I realized is that I can just do that component and piece and get 80-90% of the benefit and save 80% of the time. So it's this 80-20s Pareto's principle coming into place with the warm-up. And now I spend 7, 8, 9 minutes on the stepper, get some steps in, do some work on my phone. And then I might do I like doing a trunk activation and a dead hang, decompression of the spine, and to really just feel like, all right, am I bracing well today? Because that's important for training. And then I'm pretty much on into the warm-ups.
Oh, we can train together again then.
Yeah, we can.
Man, I'm going to come back.
The other session we did, because I came in a bit late, we just went straight into it.
Yeah, I remember.
And
it's really weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird to have you just walk in and start training.
Yeah. So some people will be like, what do you mean? That's what I do. You just try training. But there was a level of attachment that me and people like me have. It's like, I don't know, it's like putting a condom on before you have sex. It's like, no, it's not like that. It's like some people feel like I have to put the condom on before sex, right? But, that's not what a warm-up has to be.
I don't know where this analogy
That's
is
it.
going.
No, because to protect yourself, right? A
gotcha.
warm-up people
Oh,
think is
okay,
to protect
yes.
yourself
Gotcha.
against injury,
Yes.
right? And I think that's actually a great analogy once you connect it.
I didn't think protection. I thought pregnancy. That's like, so I'm just like, I don't know where you're going with this. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, so the conversation I would have, you know, so I don't mind it. Like you'll often get a client who has some kind of prescription warm-ups, you know, from, you know, a previous coach or, you know, practitioner they've been working with. And I just like to have that conversation of like, if you had to pick 20% of that you think is the most effective, like what is it?
Yeah.
Like I need to know what that is. I don't mind people doing more comprehensive warm-ups at all. But what I want to know is like, what is the most effective part of that is giving us the response? Like you talked about just before about the temperature, you know what I mean? And so, you know, for some people, there's going to be things that I think can stay. Myself, like I tend to, there are things that I will do, but sometimes it will actually be as like an active rest in between like my ramping sets
like a
of like
filler.
the first exercise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And more often than not, it's the actual exercise itself in those ramping sets that are kind of taking care of like getting my body prepared for what's to come.
Absolutely.
You know?
That's a great point. Fillers is what we call them. Is you're doing movements and drills in between your sets as you're warming up to be efficient. So your warm up becomes now like a rolling warm up instead of a warm up starting and stopping. The warm up and preparation is like rolling into your session.
Exactly. And that's like an efficient, because look, this is another thing as a coach has a client in the gym for a certain amount of time. Like a lot of people do not have 2 hours to go to the gym.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, like how can we make this an effective integration into the ramping sets? It makes sense, you know, to make more efficient use of time. It's also why, so this is another thing that I've probably changed my mind on, but a long time ago, was when I first started training, you know, you go back like 20 years, it was like push, pull, legs, push, pull, legs. And as a guy who's never had great arms, I just did not get a lot of good arm growth with that setup. Like I would go to do biceps after back, and admittedly, I was very strong on back, terribly weak on biceps. Like there was like a lot of disparity in there, and it was reflected in my physique, you know? So then, and I would probably credit Ben Pakulski for this back in his, I think it was MI40 launch kind of days where he had his programs. And it was the first time I'd really seen like antagonists, you know, like back and triceps, chest and biceps. And not only did I, like, it made a lot of sense to me. Oh God, he had some killer tempos in the MI40. I just remembered that. But then as in practice, I found myself giving attention to my arms in a whole new way that I hadn't done prior in a very typical push-pull, you know? So I'm very aware of that now with my programming, especially if I have someone whose like limbs might need the attention, like their arms, that if they're not pushing, if I see a big disparity in like the loads that they're shifting, like doing triceps after chest, I'll be like, guess what? We are going to try like a back triceps model for you, or a separate arms day for you, you know, those kind of setups. So that's something that I've changed from a program design perspective over the years.
Yeah, so that antagonist, agonist.
I definitely do way more of it than I used to.
Yeah, and I, yeah, okay. Yeah, same. And a lot of supersets, triceps.
And sorry, to go, I kind of launched off the previous conversation, which was about time management. You know, so if you are like pairing sets up and you do antagonists, especially I feel like if it's like if it's back with triceps, you're not really taking away from like the performance, okay, from either of those by doing it. It's not a race. I tend to use the terminology paired sets instead of supersets for no other reason that when I say supersets, I think the super, it sort of like gives people the impression that it's a race, and it's like, oh, hey, there's like some kind of like fat burning, like metabolic component to this. And it's like, no, nothing to do with it at all. This is literally just a way of us doing two exercises. And you couldn't do that if you were doing like back and biceps. You would never pair up back and biceps together, right?
Yeah, because usually they cook each other.
Yeah,
but you can do it. They're just usually.
Well, you wouldn't. So
you could, but you wouldn't.
Mate, don't let me see you doing that.
Let's have a look at my programs. Oh shit. Well, whatever. The only caveat, and to argue against myself, would be for older people who are growing in age. Sometimes they're less limber, the joints are more beat up, and the warm-up can be a really effective moment in time for them to get that work. And I think for some people, I actually always thought about it like this. A warm-up for me wasn't just for the session. A warm-up for me ended up being, well, this 20 minutes is really when I'm just going to get some different type of movement and end range positions and mobility drills in and soft tissue work in that I wouldn't ordinarily get because my day is designed in a way where I don't build that in. And so the warm-up now became for me, so I'm going to argue against myself, the warm-up also can be, this can be your 20 minutes. If you don't get it anywhere else, it can be a great tool.
Okay.
No, you're not buying that?
No, I can do with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Yeah. I'm going to shout out my client. This is a little bit different, but I got to coach Brady Curtin once, and he's an awesome coach. Everyone go follow Brady. I remember because I used to PT him back when I was personal training as well, and he would have a post-training routine that would be like ages. You know what I mean? Like he would lie down and he would like really just like go in the zone and just like, I don't know, it was like meditating. I can't remember, but it was like so long. But he was so structured about it. It never changed. And I just thought, man, I love the fact that he's got that routine, you know what I mean? Like in his post-workout. So
that's a great point. Does he still do it to this day?
I would assume so.
Okay.
We'll have to get him on.
Because I used to also do 10 minutes of like parasympathetic breathing, 5-10 minutes. It was really important to me. Drop cortisol, get down to homeostasis, drop heart rate, and have a buffer between training and the rest of your life. And then time became more pressed for me in my life because I got busier with business and life, and I stopped doing that. And now I realize it doesn't make that much big of a difference, and I can couple that, and I can actually do that in places like the shower after training. I can do my meditation and breathing there, because I used to always think, oh, you got to calm the hell down after you train, and I believe you do. It doesn't have to be immediately after. You can habit stack it with other things.
So this is taking it off topic, but you just reminded me of something. Is that so last year I started creative writing after a 25-year hiatus.
He's out the game.
Right? So,
he's back in.
So I spent a lot of time like thesaurus, using the thesaurus. But anyway, so within 3 days of doing that, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting everything that I want from like the meditating, the mindfulness activities that I'm like building into my day, to just like be super present, to like have and be very aware of like my inner being and everything like that. I was getting that with zero friction from going into my writing.
How good.
Right. And I remember ringing my mum. It was in a this is funny. So I had my training book out, it was at Athleticon across the road here at Jimmy's gym. And I was like recording my numbers. And then I just like had this like great idea for like one of the chapters, and I started writing for the book in between sets. Right. And I remember thinking, I laughed at myself, and I'm like, here I am. I'm like writing about like dwarves and elves in like a fantasy novel in my break. And I got into the car and I rang my mum and I just said, you're not going to believe what I'm doing right now. And she's like, what? And I'm like, I started to write a book. And she she loved that. She's like, oh my God, like I remember when you were a kid, you used to write a book. And I'm like, I have to tell you something that I've noticed, because my mum's very much into, mindfulness, meditation, spiritual person and things like that. And I told her, I'm like, I'm getting everything I want out of some of the practices that I employ that I still get a lot of friction over. You know what I mean? I have to really apply myself to meditate. It's like not the easiest thing in the world for me, and I can appreciate that. It doesn't have to be easy. But the physiological and psychological benefits that I had from some of these practices and behaviors that I was trying to instill in myself, zero friction. I was just like getting all of them from going into this writing. And that's what I'm looking for with clients. That's what you alluded to before, is like, is there a different way to get the outcome that you're looking for?
And there usually always is. It doesn't have to be as hard as you think.
Yeah.
Like you found a way to couple those together. Man, it's like, what we call it is, James Clear talks about this, temptation bundling. Temptation bundling. You do something that you need to do with something you really want to do. The writing you want to do.
Yeah.
You need to meditate when you couple those things together in a beautiful way. That's great. We got, unless there's anybody else on the live who's got what they've changed their mind on, I have one more on training. And that is quite a controversial statement, and that's I used to think exercise was a really good tool for weight loss. And now, thanks to you, because you showed me the book, Herman Ponce wrote a book called Burn, And it changed my entire view of metabolism. And recent research from different tribes around Africa and the world. And what that book illuminates is that we put training and exercise on a pedestal as a great tool for weight loss, which it can be to an extent, but it is appearingly much more over-exaggerated, and it is not that good of a tool for weight loss because our body seems what we think happens, what we thought used to happen is the factorial model, is that if you burn 100 calories in training and exercise, that means you can eat 100 calories. Okay, but this is not the case. It seems that our body adapts to increasing exercise. So let's say you burn 1,000 calories on energy expenditure from a gym session or a run.
Alex is trying to break the SECO model right here in front of us, everyone.
The SECO model? The calories in, calories out?
Yeah. Let's give him some rope.
I'm not trying to break the model because your body will utilize and it will compensate. It will take it from other energy systems. So you might start down, like in a deficit this is. In a deficit is the context here. You might start down regulating your endocrine system, your reproductive system, your respiratory system, your NEAT.
It's all carbohydrates and insulin, man.
The carbohydrates model.
I've been told. We just go keto.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Shout out to the Keto King, Brandon Carter.
No, Ponce's research is incredible, and I think it makes all of us who, work with metabolism, kind of like take pause to think, you know what I mean, about like what some of this research says. But nonetheless, it's not going to take away from what you see in practical experience.
Yeah, let me talk.
Do you know what I mean?
That.
We still work in some very fundamental principles to achieve fat loss, and that is like controlling caloric intake, controlling the variables of output, looking at having discussions around behavior of like using like steps and things like that as a way to stabilize, I suppose, some of that non-exercise activity when we're going through fat loss phases, deficits. I think when you read that book, it makes you second guess all that for a second, right? Yeah. You're like, oh man, I got it wrong. And it's like, man, look at all the people you've got shredded. You're fine. But I think it's just pause to think about like some of the how amazing the body is and some of the physiological adaptations that do occur. I want to get Ponce on this podcast, man.
Yeah,
because I just got questions. I just want to like come at him like with like the way that we do things and just kind of get his perspectives and viewpoints on it.
Well, I think the contention would be that I want to try and pull some quotes from here that as you increase the amount of energy burned on physical activity, it's not that it doesn't help directly. Well, he would say probably doesn't help as much with weight loss as we think, but then the energy available for other tasks in the human body is diminished. So with a fixed energy budget, everything is a trade-off. Instead of adding to the calories you burn each day, exercise will tend to reduce the energy spent on other activities. You can't spend the same calories twice. So when energy is scarce, some non-essential metabolic processes are suppressed. When times are good, some non-essential metabolic processes are promoted.
Hey, fertility.
Yeah.
Immune system.
Yeah. Get sick more often.
Man, how often like are you having a discussion with a client about like, hey, I'm sick, should I train? What do you say?
I had to assess the severity of the sickness. Yeah. But usually, in almost all cases, I'm saying do low intensity, steady state movement and don't go out and train that hard because the amount of resources that will take will usually appearingly take longer for you to recover.
Yeah. So my thoughts are this. I would usually kind of explain it how you just pulled out of Ponce's book there, which would be, look, it's a case of allocation of resources. You've got a certain amount of energy that's going to come in right now. And if you reallocate all of that energy towards the musculoskeletal system for the fact of like performance and recovery, of which I'm telling you is going to be very suboptimal because look at you, you're a mess, right? You're going to divert those resources away from your immune system. Those little men, they need to do their job and you're going to like stop that from happening. What's that going to do? That's going to probably risk, this infection like taking hold and you being out of action for longer, right? So I'm like in the acute phase, I don't see the benefit of redirecting those calories towards shitty training sessions anyway, right? It's just like, go and move for the sake of moving if like you're able to with this while being this sick. And then as you feel like the acute phase is finishing, then I would go and test the waters. And that testing the waters, what I usually say is you go in and you might be aiming for around about like 40% of your workout at around about 40 to 50% intensity. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm
build
like,
back up.
that's right. And then I'm like, over the next 5 sessions, build back up to 100%. That's just rough numbers, but I just sort of say, look, cool, add 10%, more sets, add 10% to the training load. And then by 5 kind of training sessions worth of length, might be like roughly a week, you might be back at 100%. And this is for just like, the average like cold and flu type stuff that like, people might get. But it's a conversation around like people want to train like when they're sick, and it's just like.
You can if you want. I mean, you can gog into your life if you want, but I just want to feel better quicker. And usually that means resting and sleeping.
Yeah. Because you'll see the scenario where someone trains and trains and trains and you're just like, that they're suppressing that immune system to the point where their recovery is taking longer and longer. And you're just like, you could have been by now.
We could have fixed this already.
You could have been well. You could have been performing at 100%. But you decided to drag it out. Yeah, and go from there.
Oh, I thought there was more to that.
It's just
yeah, I can almost sense like a bit of like frustration there. Like I know you've dealt with that a few times, but I'm trying to pull up.
It gets hard. I say, actually, you know why I have dealt with that a few times is because like when you have people that have got deadlines, you have shows, you have meets, you have something and like it's like the train doesn't stop, and I get it. Like I suppose bent those rules when they're like when you've got to be, shredded by a certain date, and then you get sick. Like there are caveats that have to occur, you know what I mean, to that conversation. But nonetheless, when we're talking about just like basic principles.
And what I want to pull up now is just to finish on this point, because I understand that what we just talked about is not going to be sufficient for people to believe it. You would need to read the book or listen to the audiobook, which will probably change your view and life. And what I'm trying to see is there was this study on the Hadza, and they remember that they compared it to the average population of people. And the Hadza, do you remember how many steps they'll walk on average a day?
No, I mean.
So the walk, people was like, how much do I walk? How much do I walk? Well, the Hadza, if you want to use like a tribe that is somewhat representative in Tanzania of what historical human beings would have been, they will walk about 16,000 steps a day. 16,000. So you can use that as a guide to understand, all right, well, how much should I walk? Well, maybe somewhere between 10 and 16 would be good. Daily energy expenditure for Hadza men and women are the same as adults in industrial populations. Sorry, let me say that again. Daily energy expenditure for Hadza men and women walking 16,000 steps a day, doing a lot of physical activity, are the same as adults who are representative of sedentary movement, sedentary activity. So how could that be? Like, how could people who are much more active expend the same amount of energy? And this is just one example of many across that he has done. There's many studies on this. And so they're the same, yet their activity levels are wildly different. So if exercise was this all-incredible tool for weight loss as it is sold to be, then why wouldn't we see differences across these many, 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 many studies that are referenced in his book? Why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And the body adapts.
Yeah, I think actually a lot of this is to do with non-exercise. You know what I mean? Like an exercise, a training session is what? Like 45, 60 minutes. But what we're also talking about is like the output in general, right? And so...
total daily energy expenditure.
Yes. Yeah.
Which exercise is adding to that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that maybe we should backstep here that I would normally clarify with a client is just to get them to realize, like, look, this weights training session is only burning like 150 calories, like 200 calories. And if they don't know that, and that's the first time they've heard that, they're usually shocked if they kind of somewhat understand calories to realize that a weights training session isn't really burning that many calories. Because in the past, as we know, like, the complex relationship between training and hunger and caloric intake is that we'll have a lot of individuals will license themselves to eat more based on like their training sessions. Like, oh, I trained really hard.
No.
And it's like refeed time. It's like you burned 150 calories. Like,
and even that mentality is not healthy, because now you're thinking you have to earn your food.
Yeah.
You earn your food by being a human being. Like most average human beings need to consume between 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day just to keep them alive and moving and functioning and training, right? So for you to now have this distorted relationship that, I trained really hard, so I'm going to eat the extra donut or eat the extra thing, is distorted and unhealthy. Like, you didn't earn the food. You need the food to nourish you and fuel you. And your training, you should begin to associate, your exercise, you should begin to associate for different reasons. What is it giving you? It's giving you better well-being. It's giving you more muscle mass. It's giving you better health mentally and psychologically. So try and separate them as best you can. It doesn't even work anyway. It's like the science of it is fractured anyway. Your metabolism shifts, your metabolism adapts as you train more and more and more in a deficit, that is.
And so, like, a coach has levers to pull when they suspect that the caloric deficit needs to be increased, right? That is, you can adjust the nutritional intake downwards, you can increase the output, or you can do a combination of both of those things. When you're increasing the output, what a coach doesn't do, hopefully, is think that adding more sets within a training session is going to liberate more body fat stores to the point where you're going to lose more body fat and increase that aggressiveness of that deficit. Or add a training session. You know what I mean? You go from 4 sessions to 5 sessions a week and expect that you're going to get a significant difference in fat loss. You just decreased your calories by 200 calories for the week. Divide that by 7. That's 30 calories. That's like the inaccuracy that you just did creating that meal.
So it's a fucking bite of a banana.
That's right. And so, like, but this is sometimes where you want to just have this discussion with a client who maybe has a misperception on training, just to kind of get them to realize training is good. Like, we want you to train.
Yes.
We want you to resistance train.
Yes.
There are so many benefits. You're going to look the way you want to look by doing this.
Yes.
You're not going to burn extra body fat by adding a couple of sets, adding a couple of reps, or even adding a whole training session.
And what about the fatigue? How much more fatigue do they now have to deal with because they've added that in?
Oh, yeah.
There's a trade-off.
But that's like, sweat is fat crying. You know what I mean?
Sweat is fat.
Sweat is fat crying.
Crying.
It's a classic.
That's funny.
It's classic.
That's a good one by you.
That's not by me. That's like an industry standard.
That's Ben Cant 2022. 2023. Well, it's the first time I heard it.
Mate, that's like on T-shirts.
Oh, is it?
Donnie, you've heard of that. Sweaty. Oh, my God.
Donnie.
This is like, I'm a boomer, aren't I? This is like from...
You're a boomer who doesn't warm up.
Something.
You're a man of many talents.
Hey, so anything else on training? Go to nutrition?
No, train hard, lift heavy weights, and do it every day. All right, next. Nutrition. Yeah. We got gluten. Mm-hmm. We got natural is better.
Oh, okay. This is kind of like what we talked about in the cognitive biases, our episode 1.
Yeah. Would you like to begin with any of them?
So what have I changed my mind on?
Processed foods as well, perhaps, versus non-processed. Dairy as well.
No, you start, because I'm trying to think what I've changed my mind on recently with that.
Well, it's in the recently. It's not like it was yesterday for me. Yeah. Like, it was in the last couple of years. Gluten and associated compounds, lactose. Besides genetic conditions, they have been historically demonized as problematic food compounds that I know it's not what health practitioners mean, but they display it in a way where gluten should be feared and demonized, and like it causes serious gut issues. And I would like to dispute that and say that in an unhealthy, compromised health environment and gut environment, gluten and FODMAPs and lectins and lactose, etc., can be very problematic at triggering autoimmune-like reactions and inflammatory cytokines and all the cascade of inflammation that can occur. But it is almost always, a lot of the time, not the compound's fault alone, but of the state and environment of the human and the physiology itself. And if you fix the physiology itself, then you're able to digest, assimilate, and tolerate a lot of these compounds, and they therefore do not need to be feared or demonized, and it is possible to have a healthy diet and body and mindset and blood work and everything, and consume those foods periodically if you fix the underlying issue to your gut issues. And the reason I can speak with such conviction, one, because me and Ben do this, and I'm a living example of this as someone who used to bloat every single meal. I think you knew me early stages or just after I did this. I fixed this with Dave O'Brien, one of the best, smartest human beings that I know on the gut. He helped change my life and fixed this. Now I help other people do that same thing. I couldn't tolerate anything. Now, it actually took me some time to like decouple the detachment emotionally, like, oh, gluten, nocebo effect. I'm going to trick my brain into thinking this is going to get me. Now, it's still, every now and again, it's a seed in the back of my head, but I relax about it and I'm like, okay, show me. Show me. If you're going to cause a deleterious response, show me. So I try and just pull back and be like, okay, let me sit. Any nausea, any brain fog, any bloating, any reflux, all these symptoms. All right, no? Then what the hell was I so concerned about killing myself, feeling guilty and shameful over once I fix these issues?
Yeah, well said.
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant. I can completely relate to that. I feel like I had my own journey with dairy.
Really?
You know, yeah, like in that way. Not so much gluten. Although gluten, like my mum's a celiac. Yeah. You know, so and we were aware of this like a long time ago when like there was not a lot of talk about celiac disease. And when I did my final year, one of my final year projects in my degree, in my chemistry, was I decided to look at the ways in which wheat had changed over, you know, farming practices. And that for me it highlighted, and it kind of, I was like, oh, look at all these discrepancies. Now, back then when I did, this is like like probably 2001, 2002 or something. Back then, A, I wasn't in the health field at all. B, like my degree didn't actually have any kind of like crossover into nutrition or anything like that. But because my mum had celiac disease, because I was like a 21-year-old kid, because I did a project and I looked at how much wheat had changed, you know, and then I looked at my mum. I put, 2 and 2 together equals 4, so that kind of set me up to think, okay, be careful around wheat. Like I gave it this pedestal to stand up on and be a big scary
character,
boogeyman. Yeah. And then I think over the years, that as you can, okay, look, let's look at the research, let's look at the evidence, and let's become more knowledgeable on the subject. You come to a certain understanding. And I think what you point out, and this is the conversation because you and I both deal with a lot of gut clients, right? And we've done this digestion workshop, which we have to do again. We said we're going to do that again because I really want people to come to this workshop, because I think more than anything, what Alex and I cover in this workshop is that like 95% of people can address a lot of their gut symptoms by some of the simple practices that we talk about in here without even getting coaching. You know what I mean? It's like literally, there's a cheat sheet that we give you and go, hey, here is what we do. And it's like 95% of people. That's it. There's nothing scary. There's nothing weird. There's nothing complex. It's like fundamental stuff done well.
Yeah.
Right?
It's in the Discord. Go links in our bios and links in the YouTube description. Go join our Discord.
Yeah. I forgot where I was going with that.
You talk about dairy, to the fear around it. Then you went to digestion, but dairy, fear, your mother.
Yeah. So like what I was going to say was what we talk about, and this is what we do in coaching though, is we measure symptoms. Do you know what I mean? So if someone has this would be in the consultation, in the appointment. If someone has a perception around a certain, food groups being evil, then it'd be like, well, why do you say that? What happens? Like, what have you got? And there may be some symptoms. It's like, oh, I have these gut symptoms, or I have these cognitive symptoms, or whatever. If they can't explain that, perhaps you kind of like prompt them with some ideas about what those symptoms might be. And you go, oh, actually, you know what? I do get that, without trying to, force it upon them. But if they do have some symptoms around different food groups, or they just have some symptoms in general and they can't pinpoint it to a certain food group, the most important thing you can do is track.
Yeah.
Bloating, stool, put it down. Like get a habit tracking app, get a spreadsheet, get a notes in your phone, and then you actually go and you kind of like look at the trend. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? When you have a remarkable or an acute flare up or a problem, that's a remarkable day. What were the preceding events? What precipitated that? What were the food groups that you ate? What was your state of being? Were you rushed when you ate? What was your sleep like the night before? What was emotionally, where were you at? All these can be contributing factors towards poor digestion. And when you track, that becomes apparent. And that's what I say to clients. I did this literally in a consultation yesterday. I was like, listen, you're going to probably coach yourself through this process because I've given you a killer spreadsheet that tracks these symptoms. And what you're going to see is that when you put pen to paper and you put down the score 1 to 10, how severe was the bloating, how severe was the, whatever. And then there's a notes bit right next to that. And then any remarkable flare up, you're going to have to write that. You're going to start building up that evidence towards what are the likely contributing factors towards that. And I'm going to be here and we're going to talk through it. And that's how we come to realize what are the things we have to be aware of.
Well said. Because most people walk through their health and their life blindly. They know they have a problem, but they're not aware of it.
Yeah.
They kind of feel like shit sometimes, and then it passes, then it comes back again. And it's just fucking malaise of living.
Yeah.
You're not really living. And so the tracking, the world-class spreadsheet that we've built and spent a lot of money on allows, and you don't need you don't need that. You don't need fucking even us. Don't even hire us, right? Notion is a great one you can do habits on. You just start measuring. What gets measured gets managed. And your ignorance, it's like you're short-sighted. You ain't got good vision. You put glasses on, you can see. That's what it does. Now you can make better decisions and things are clear and you're connecting dots and now you have more certainty over your health and your life.
And there's two things that measuring does, right? That I really like about it. One is that it gets rid of the narrative that you can build up that you can be attributing like this to. So people will say, oh, I get it because of this reason and this reason. And it's kind of like they build up this narrative because one time, it's a story. We have these biases that we keep employing upon one of the reasons why this is happening. And that kind of breaks down, when you start tracking. I forgot the second reason.
That's a great first reason because we trick ourselves. It's like we think we're so arrogant. Not arrogant always, but we think we're so certain that a certain symptom is associated with something. Are you sure? How much do you really know about the human body? Not to be disrespectful to anybody's knowledge, but most people are expertise in their fields of domain. They're a lawyer, they're a nurse, they're a fucking, they work in hospitality. I thought when I entered this industry, why the hell are we doing anything else but studying the human body? Why is anybody doing anything else? We all have a human body. We know nothing about it. Why the hell didn't I just learn about it?
Man, this is going to be compulsory in school. And I remember the second reason, and it's going to be funny that this is the second reason, is that we have shit recall.
Yeah, we do.
Which I just exemplified by forgetting the reason. The irony. Right? The irony, exactly. So so that's the second thing is that and this is what I'll say, a lot of our trackers can be filled in once a week. They don't have to be filled in daily. There's things that I'm you can come back and it's a weekly process. This symptom tracking of a remarkable day is not something I want you to try and recall 7 days later.
Absolutely.
Okay? That, you get on the phone, you open up that section and you start writing. Okay, what happened? What did you eat? How are you feeling? How was sleep? How was stress? Is there any other precipitating events or preceding factors that might have been contributing towards this occurring?
You need proximity.
Okay, because your recall is horrible.
Yeah. The human memory is extremely fallible.
Yeah.
There's I can't remember exact stories, but you can be severely influenced to thinking false. You can create false memories by being in courtrooms, in court cases, people will have to talk to judges about something that has happened 6 months ago, a year ago. It's our memory is terrible for that stuff.
Yeah.
Which I won't get into. I'm going to skip the other one. That was a really good conversation. And I think it's time to go to one of my favorites that you've brought up. It's psychology and its idea of willpower. I almost don't want to steal it for the audience if you want to go ahead and say it, but do you have a preference of whether you go ahead or you want me to drive it?
I told you I can't help it. I have to leak this, but I'm not done. So just to preface this, I was talking before that we started rolling, and I'm reading Nir Eyal. Is that his name? I'm totally butchering his name. And again, I want him on this podcast already. I haven't even finished his book yet.
Nireyal.
I'm not going to try and say it again. Anyway, I'm a third of the way through his book, Indestructible. Not Indestructible, Alex. Alex straight away thought I was said indestructible because his mindset, workshop is
Dominate.
all about dominating. That's right. But it was indistractable. It's more about focus, and it's got a lot of tones in it from everything from James Clear and controlling the environment with your habits through to like Cal Newport and those kind of guys as well. So it's great already. Now, he gets into a third of the way through this book and he starts talking about willpower and self-control. And one of our favorite books on willpower is
Kelly
McGonagall's. And also let's shout out to Menno Henselman as well. Now, a lot of the ways that I've described self-control and willpower in the past is, it comes from like, the things we've learned from Kelly and things like that. And I think a lot of the coaches having this discussion on social media as well, we have a tendency to describe it in similar ways. And we'll say things like willpower is like a muscle. Okay. So it's like a tank that, may, over the day, certain things are going to deplete that. So if you think about a muscle, it can be fatigued, right? And so we would say, well, what are the contributing factors towards poor willpower? That would be sleep, lack of sleep, stress, poor diet, and lack of physical activity, which are fundamentally the four things a coach talks about with a client, by the way. Like those four things right there are our biggest principles that we go by. So when we have that conversation, it's like, well, what do we want to do to optimize our willpower then? Well, we want to make sure that we're physically fit, make sure that we've got our nutrition done. We also want to be doing things like making less decisions. You know what I mean? So we don't have that decision fatigue and that kind of thing creeping in as well. Now, Nia, in his book, he goes, look, when you look at the data and you look at some of the research, what we actually get when we start looking from a greater level is that those people that believe that very thing, that willpower can be fatigued and stuff, they are the ones that will consequently suffer from that. And if you don't believe that, it ain't so. So it's premature because I haven't finished the book.
I don't think it's premature.
Okay.
At all. I believe our beliefs are the most powerful things in the world. And maybe I'll send you the link. I will send you the link if I remember. My mindset workshop that I did, there was a whole section on belief systems. And I had this conversation. It's so crazy you bring this up. I had this conversation with one of my clients about a month or two ago, right? He's talking about willpower. And I was open-minded when we initially talked about this. I'm like, okay, cool, willpower. I never really pushed it that much, but I was definitely open-minded. It's like, okay, cool. Willpower, it makes logical sense. There's certain things that deplete your abilities to exert effort into the world. Sure. I refuse to believe it. Like, I have no interest in believing in something that can weaken me and make me worse. Willpower. Why do I have a limited, scarce source of it? Why? Who the fuck says? No, I refuse to believe that. No. I can conjure up as much willpower as I design. I have unlimited energy all day, every day, don't care. Like, why would I believe something that could possibly make me less than? And so if I refuse, and I've had this thought and feeling for a little while, and if I just refuse to believe that, I can be stronger, more powerful, more productive, more efficient. So willpower, I'm not interested in believing it because it just puts a limitation on my abilities. So I have no interest in doing that. So I'm going to conduct my life as if I have less limitations or no limitations. I am capable of more. I can do more. Why would I believe something that's of contrary to that?
Yeah. 100%, man. And in saying this, I think it's important to note that the last thing you ever want to do, and I don't do this, is instill in an individual, right, that it's a vulnerability that could like it is a weakness. You know what I mean? You always want to be using language which is like empowering and like a winning language.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I don't take someone and
I know you wouldn't.
Yeah, try to say, oh, don't do that because that's going to drain your willpower.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
never a conversation like that. It's more like just having an awareness about, okay, what's going on in this person's life? What are some of where are they not doing the things that they say they're going to do, and how are we going to be working on that? And I do totally agree with a lot of what you're saying because it's like environment, right? everyone, I'm sure by now, has heard echoes of how important it is to be the architect of your environment. That is like everything from like where you spend your physical time, where you spend your mental time, you know what I mean? All these apps and everything else and stuff like that, who you spend your time with, your friends, your colleagues, like your workplace, and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's really important to like train in a gym that inspires you, you know, that kind of thing as well. And I think like controlling that environment, like again, it like reduces friction to get from point A to point B quicker. But in saying that, having some of the most incredible stories come out of like people in spite of their environments. And I think that there is some, you know, some insights into that, you know, that like, you know, tough times, tough environments, like they craft you into becoming like, you know, an absolute weapon.
Trauma is a gift. I say that to a lot of my clients with like complex PTSD and depression, anxiety. I know some people are going to disagree with this. Clinically, I understand that people can have these feelings, but I also try and guide my clients to be very wary of their language around these feelings and never be very, very careful about language like that makes them weaker and feel less than. Like if you're I'm not even going to say the words. If you're constantly saying I'm anxious, even the words again, I'm not going to say it. You know when people have like a cold and flu, they say the S word, right? None of that to me is helpful unless you're explaining it to a loved one who you need support from, or a clinician or a health professional. I understand, okay? But all of that language defines your belief systems about yourself. And I'm pretty wary about how people could come to the end of the day and be like, oh, you know, my willpower is just so low. Or I'm just like, I just feel just like this. I feel really just bad. And I made that decision, Ben or Alexander, because my willpower just got low. It's like, you sure?
Yeah.
Environment, laziness, discipline, like want, desire, mindset, like all of these things to me precede and go above that. And I would encourage everybody to really analyze their language and their self-talk. I put out, I'll plug myself, but it's free. It's just the 50 minutes of my mindset workshop that goes deep into this on my YouTube Strength of Sight. If you want to see it, a snippet of it, that goes into a long conversation of it. But it's just, that's something I've really changed my mind on, is how powerful our words and beliefs
100%, man. And it's just like mindset can override like a lot of those other factors that we just talked about. You see it all the time. Yeah. You know, you get sometimes some clients you coach and they're just it doesn't matter what's going on, man. I just started one, this guy in Sydney that I was telling you about. And I'm just like, holy fuck. This guy, I'm just like, this guy's going to dominate. He's unstoppable. You know what I mean? In spite of like a lot of stuff, you know, and that's just like someone I want to coach. You know, they're going to go far. So, yeah. It's a very interesting topic. I can't wait to finish this book.
To see what the conclusion is?
Yeah, I have to. I'm only a third of the way in and I'm just like instantly like just, you know, having the podcast about like, what have you changed your mind on? I'm like, I'm kind of there because like you're already hinting at it, but I'm like, I'm going to rephrase some of the ways that I've been saying things
That's great. It's very mature of you.
Yeah. If I think this through, you know, and I land on that side. So.
I love that. I love that about you because you have, you know, you're over 10 years older than me and you can easily get bogged down. I don't know what it's like to be old. I don't know what it's like to be a 70, 80-year-old just sick and tired of life and just like angry at the world, right? But I have some empathy for those people. But to continue to have the open-mindedness to change your mind, especially publicly, to me is like such a beautiful, great trait. And I hope we and you can continue to carry that on into the decades beyond.
Yeah. Like the last thing you want to be is flippant. You know, like a pushover with your values, with your ideas.
Yeah, you have anchors.
No one wants flip. Like, you know, you don't want that. But you don't want to be immovable like this. And this comes back to our first podcast. And, you know, like people want to look at that with the cognitive biases and the logical fallacies and the critical thinking. You know what I mean? Like how to think like a beast. Yeah, like I enjoyed that. I love that. I think it always gives us the opportunity. And this comes like with our weekly review. This is part of our coaching process that we encourage clients to do. You and I do it ourselves, both in business and in personal life. It's like taking that opportunity. I do it on a Friday morning, roughly around about 10 a.m. Why? Because it's a chilled time of the week for me to reflect upon the things that have been going on. And I look at what didn't go my way this week, what were my wins. I look at my gratitude. I look at my obstacles, you know, and then I go from there.
It's good.
Yeah.
I have plenty more on business, but maybe that can be a whole nother conversation in the future. Is there any more you want to mention? Things that you changed your mind on?
No, I think we're good, man.
Yeah.
We can wrap it.
Guys, Discord link in our bios, in the YouTube description. If you want to join our Discord and get all of these resources, there's a ton of resources that are given for free that a lot of you would pay for that we're just going to give out. So hop in there if you got any questions or follow-ups. Let us know. KATABASIS podcast out. Oh, but there's questions? Oh shit! There's questions. Let's go questions.
Are we still on IG? Oh, my battery lasted. Oh, you plugged it in.
All right, questions. Let's go. Q&A. I wouldn't even think generational wealth, but like I wouldn't even think generational. It's a great, nice ideal, but don't even think generational wealth before you've made 100, 200K. Teens, you got time. You got time and you got time to build skill set. There's a few areas you could go in. E-commerce is going to be a big one that you could go in. Flipping things from Alibaba, you buy a bulk of something and you flip it, you make an e-commerce store like Shopify. You got to find a need in the market. You got to research something and you either try and create your own market, read the 22 immutable laws of marketing, and you'll see how to create your own product or service that is completely unique or in a different category, or you try and iterate and improve on something that already exists. Like I'm playing with an idea right now that I'm not going to talk about, but I would think about every hour of your day as an opportunity to make money and get better. You need to become highly competent and skilled in your field of domain. It doesn't matter what it is. You need to spend every hour of your day getting better in a field or a series of fields. And it doesn't matter what it is, marketing, sales, communication, psychology, and books around that are going to be extremely resourceful and valuable. So that general question is going to get that general answer.
Oh, the Braverman test. Yes, this was something. This is good.
Braverman.
No, so I used to use the Braverman test. Yes, this is like a questionnaire, like a profiling questionnaire. I used to use it in onboarding as part of my onboarding process with like a health form and stuff like that.
I see the value.
I don't use it in my onboarding anymore, but I do use it on occasion. You know what I mean? So, and that would be, I literally just used it last week actually for a client, but it's
Olivia asked that. Doula.
Oh, during our podcast?
Just now, yeah.
Oh, she asked that now.
Yeah.
Cool, she's on. By the way, if anyone didn't watch our podcast with Olivia, like she was dropping bombs all podcast on that podcast.
Feedback we got from that, my God.
Yeah, 100%. So go back and watch that podcast. But oh no, I don't use it in onboarding anymore. I use it in more specific circumstances anymore. And I think the reason being is that, again, that test also... it comes with like a lot of recommendations under it. So there's no way of like doing the test without sort of seeing the results, and people read into that and kind of like think that there's a bunch of problems that may not necessarily be there. You know what I mean? So, and this comes back to genetic testing. So we said we were going to wrap up, but now we're flipping into things. Do I do as much genetic testing as I used to? Hell no. Did I love doing 23andMe testing when, I kind of still love it, but I won't do it as much anymore because like what I was finding is work with the results, like no matter the kind of the language that I was using with people for like that interpretation, I was having people walk away with a fatalistic, deterministic kind of like outlook.
Can't do anything, right?
I can't do anything.
I think you can though.
Exactly. And so I didn't like that aspect of it. So again, similar to like something like a Braverman test or like a profiling questionnaire, I'm just more picky about those type of tools. And whether or not, you know, that's something that like is going to create a winning mindset, you know what I mean? Or like a vulnerability mindset, like a weakness mindset and stuff.
One of the best that I've found for self-awareness is Jordan Peterson's Big 5 personality traits. Extremely thorough. It's like $10, $15. I recommend it to many clients who are trying to build more purpose in their life and want to know more about themselves. It is wonderful for highlighting traits of your character and personality that can help you understand who you might best communicate with, particularly who you would be best in a relationship with. I couldn't recommend that enough. And his future authoring program.
Yeah.
See ya.